Welcome to the family. Adrienne's voice dripped with saccharine sweetness as she handed me a perfectly wrapped gift basket. The smug satisfaction in her eyes betrayed the innocent facade as our gazes met. I managed a polite smile as I accepted the elaborately arranged basket, concealing my unease. Adrienne had made it abundantly clear from the moment I met her that I didn't truly belong in her family's elite social circle. Her chilly disdain was expertly veiled by fake hospitality, but I recognized the game, one she'd perfected over years of keeping up appearances. "Thank you, Adrienne. It's beautiful," I replied, fighting the urge to tear open the gift immediately and expose whatever passive-aggressive jab lay within. My husband Ethan beamed with oblivious pride at my side, squeezing my hand affectionately. He remained blissfully unaware of the tension simmering between his wife and sister. As the baby shower celebrations continued, Adrienne's plastic smile never wavered as she drifted between guests, the picture of graciousness. Yet when our eyes met again across the room, her gaze pierced me like sharpened daggers. Adrienne's unspoken message screamed loud and clear. This was her turf, and I would never be more than an intruder. Steeling myself, I clutched Ethan's hand tighter as we mingled among his family and their well-heeled friends. I kept the gift basket tucked securely in my arms, dreading the carefully selected insult surely wrapped within. Hours later, after the last guest had filtered out, I retreated to the bedroom and pulled off the ribbons with trembling hands. Inside the basket lay an assortment of high-end bath products and a plush terry-cloth robe, all blindingly white. At the very bottom, nestled like a viper among roses, was a single sealed envelope with neat cursive script: Mara's fresh start. My heart plummeted as realization washed over me. Adrienne knew my deepest secret, the painful past I'd fought to put behind me. A past Ethan loved me enough to accept, but one his privileged family would never understand. With shaking hands, I opened the envelope to reveal a check for $10,000 and a brief note: "For when you're ready to walk away and spare us the embarrassment." The message was clear. Adrienne's twisted generosity bought my silence and compliance or ensured my banishment. My mouth went dry as I crumpled the note, panic and rage clashing within me. The game had begun, but this time I vowed to write my own rules. In the weeks following the baby shower, Adrienne's malicious games intensified. No longer content with subtle digs, she launched an all-out offensive to drive a wedge between Ethan and me. "Mara, darling," she trilled one afternoon, sweeping into the living room uninvited, "I simply had to stop by with this precious outfit for little Emma." She thrust an over-the-top frilly dress into my hands, the lace and bows dripping with saccharine excess. "It's lovely," I managed, forcing a smile. "But really, you shouldn't have." "Nonsense," Adrienne batted her eyes innocently. "Every little princess needs an outrageously impractical gown that she'll hate in a few years." My grip tightened on the offending garment as I bit back a scathing retort. Ethan remained oblivious, offering his sister an indulgent grin. "You spoil her, Addie. What would we do without you?" The words struck like a dagger, highlighting my exclusion from their privileged inner circle. Adrienne's syrupy laugh grated my nerves. "I'm simply providing the essentials that Mara's background seems to be lacking," she purred, inspecting her freshly manicured nails. The thinly veiled insult hung in the air. Before I could respond, Ethan's phone buzzed, and he excused himself, utterly missing the subtext of our exchange. Adrienne pounced the moment he left the room. "Let's be honest, Mara, you'll never fit in here, no matter how hard you try to play the part." Her smile morphed into a condescending sneer. "My family deserves better than a child of your circumstances." White-hot anger lanced through me, but I refused to rise to her bait. Adrienne wanted me doubting myself, slipping back into old insecurities. Well, two could play at keeping up appearances. Mustering my sweetest smile, I rose to face her squarely. "Thank you for the dress, Adrienne. How considerate of you to think of us." I watched with satisfaction as her brow creased ever so slightly, caught off guard by my sugary politeness. Over the following months, I matched Adrienne's passive aggression with sickly sweet gratitude at every turn. Compliments dripping with venom were met with humble acceptance, driving her to escalating levels of pettiness. "I picked up this lovely wood varnish for you," she announced one day, thrusting a can of harsh chemicals into my hands. "Wouldn't want those habits from your past resurfacing." I simply smiled and thanked her for her thoughtfulness. With each exchange, I could see the confusion and frustration mounting behind Adrienne's meticulously crafted mask. Her twisted games held no power over me anymore. For now, I'd play the role of adoring sister-in-law, but soon enough I'd shatter Adrienne's fragile facade and display her true ugliness for all to see. The reckoning was coming. I would be sure of it. The first prickles of doubt crept in a few weeks later when an anonymous package arrived at our doorstep. Adrienne's carefully orchestrated plans were escalating. "What is this?" Ethan frowned, extracting a sealed manila envelope from the plain brown packaging. "I'm not sure." I trailed off as he tore it open. Inside was a glossy photograph of me exiting a dilapidated building, head bowed against the camera's flash. The place was all too familiar, a sobriety clinic I'd attended years ago after hitting my lowest point. "Mara?" Ethan's voice was laced with a mix of concern and confusion. "What's going on?" I felt the blood drain from my face as my gaze flickered to the plain logo embossed on the envelope, "A friend who cares." Of course, only Adrienne could concoct such a melodramatic, underhanded scheme. "It's from my past, before I got my life together." I swallowed hard, struggling to contain my rage. "An old haunt that's better left behind." Ethan slipped an arm around me, his brow furrowed. "Why would someone send this? Trying to dredge up ancient history?" "You'd have to ask your dear sister about that." The words slipped out in a clipped tone before I could stop them. He recoiled as if I'd slapped him. "Adrienne, why would you accuse her of something so horrible?" "Use your eyes, Ethan." I shoved the damning photograph into his hands. "Who else would go to such depths to try driving me away?" His jaw tensed, but he said nothing. The flicker of doubt in his eyes spoke volumes. In the days after, a heavy pall hung over our home. Ethan avoided the subject, but I could see the wariness in his movements, the questioning glances when he thought I wouldn't notice. Adrienne had planted her seeds of deception, and they were taking root. The breaking point came when I returned home from running errands to find Adrienne's car in the driveway. I braced myself for another round of her twisted mind games. "There you are!" She bounced out of the front door, all sugary smiles, Ethan trailing behind with a distracted air. "I've been simply dying to catch up." Before I could formulate a response, she looped her arm through mine and steered me towards the kitchen. "Ethan told me about that dreadful photograph," she stage-whispered with a grimace. "I can't imagine who would stoop to such lows." The sickly sweet concern in her voice was a razor's edge against my nerves. "Yes, how unfortunate," I responded flatly, pulling my arm from her grasp. "I'll be sure to thank them for reopening old wounds." Adrienne's eyes widened in exaggerated hurt. "Why, Mara? I'd never dream of inflicting such pain. You know I only want what's best for you and my beloved brother." Her saccharine tone twisted the knife deeper. "That's why I've reached out to a dear friend who specializes in personal makeovers, shall we say?" I opened my mouth to respond, but she barreled on with the air of one bestowing an act of supreme generosity. "Derek will be simply marvelous in helping you put the past where it belongs, behind you." Adrienne smiled with smug satisfaction. "Won't that be transformative?" "That's quite enough, Addie." Ethan's sharp voice cut through her self-congratulations. "If Mara wants help, she'll let us know." My heart lurched to see him rallying to my defense. A flicker of uncertainty passed over Adrienne's face, but her mask quickly reset to one of sugary concern. "Of course, you're both right. I only want to ease this difficult transition." As she swept towards the door, she tossed one last poisoned barb over her shoulder. "After all, we are family now." The door clicked shut with sickening finality. This wasn't a game anymore, it was open warfare, and I had no choice but to fight with everything I had. In the aftermath of Adrienne's latest ploy, I found an unlikely ally in Samantha, one of Ethan's cousins. She sought me out a few days later with a somber expression. "Mara, I need to talk to you about Adrienne." I braced myself, expecting another round of her manipulations. But Samantha surprised me. "I know what she's doing. The lying, the sabotage. Adrienne put me through a similar hell a few years back." Her lips tightened into a hard line. "I won't let her do that to anyone else in this family." The raw pain in Samantha's eyes stopped me cold. Suddenly, her past falling out with Adrienne made sense. "You've seen her true colors, too," I murmured, realization dawning. Samantha nodded jerkily. The fake smiles, the backhanded generosity, it's all a mind game to her. She can't stand seeing others happy if she's not the center of attention. Her hands clenched into white-knuckled fists as she recounted Adrian's torment when Samantha got engaged years ago. How the so-called sisterly advice slowly muddled into discreet jabs about Samantha's fiancé's shortcomings. Innocent innuendos that planted seeds of doubt until her relationship collapsed under the strain. By the time I realized what she was doing, it was too late, Samantha whispered, anguish lacing her voice. I lost everything that truly mattered to me because of her malice. White-hot anger lanced through me at the thought of Adrian's depravity, but I pushed it aside, focusing on the bigger picture. We can stop this, I stated with firm resolve, but we'll need to be smart and ready to fight fire with fire. A glimmer of hope kindled in Samantha's eyes. You have a plan? I nodded grimly. One that will blow Adrian's twisted game wide open. But it has to be perfectly executed, with no margin for error. Over the next few weeks, Samantha and I constructed an airtight counteroffensive. We documented every one of Adrian's thinly veiled jabs and assembled a compelling case to present to Ethan's parents. But that was just step one. The real masterstroke involved throwing an intimate family dinner, creating a perfectly staged scenario where Adrian's vicious true nature would detonate for all to see. No more masks, no more twisted kindnesses masking her malice. As the dinner date approached, I could sense Adrian's growing desperation in her transparent overtures of bonding over wedding china patterns and baby bronzing ideas. She knew something was afoot, but couldn't pinpoint the source of her unraveling control. The night before, Samantha and I made the final preparations, every potential stumbling block accounted for. Are you ready for this? She asked, eyes blazing with determination. Once we go through with it, there's no going back. I took a deep breath and nodded. More than ready. It's time Adrian experienced the karma she's had coming for a long time. The next evening, the stage was set. With bright smiles and warm embraces, we welcomed Ethan's family into our home, playing the roles of genial hosts to perfection. Even Adrienne seemed to let her guard down fractionally as she breezed in, her trademark smugness in place. She knew how to work a crowd, a fact I was counting on. As the evening built towards its crescendo, I caught Samantha's eye across the room and gave an almost imperceptible nod. Her grim smile and slight tilt of her glass was all the response I needed. Let the reckoning begin. As the dinner proceeded, the air thickened with tension. Samantha and I exchanged furtive glances, silently coordinating our every move. Adrienne, ever the mistress of performance, remained blindly oblivious to the trap being carefully laid. Mara, darling, you simply must tell me where you found this exquisite china pattern, she gushed, running a perfectly manicured nail along the rim of her plate. The details are just sublime. I suppressed an eye roll at her overwrought theatrics. Oh, just a little something I picked up, I replied with syrupy sweetness. I'm delighted you like it. Adrienne's smile stretched a touch too wide, giving her porcelain features a manic cast. Like it? I absolutely adore it. She turned to address the rest of the table, her voice carrying just an octave too high. Mara has such impeccable taste, don't you agree? A few murmurs of polite agreement rippled around the table. Ethan's brow furrowed almost imperceptibly, no doubt registering the undercurrent of tension. I had her squirming now, just as we'd planned. Well, you know me, I demurred with a tinkling laugh. I simply can't resist finding little treasures in unexpected places. Adrienne's eyes narrowed infinitesimally at the seeming barb. Samantha caught my gaze and arched a challenging eyebrow. Game on. In fact, I continued in a louder tone, these plates held quite the checkered past before finding their way to me. Confused glances ricocheted around the table, but Adrienne remained laser-focused, the tightness around her eyes the only crack in her facade. You see, I pressed on relentlessly, they have a history of being rejected, cast aside by the very people who should have cherished them most. A muscle twitched in Adrienne's jaw, but she remained outwardly impassive. Touché. The barbs continued flying in both directions, each phrased with such exaggerated politeness that the others remained oblivious to the underlying battle being waged. Finally, in a stroke of feigned concern, Samantha interjected, Adrienne, I do hope you're not coming down with something. You look quite flushed. The harried desperation was palpable in Adrian's too bright smile now. Whatever do you mean? I'm perfectly... Perhaps it's all this talk of treasures with complicated backgrounds, Samantha crooned with faux innocence. It can be quite discomforting for those of us unaccustomed to such acquired tastes. In that moment, something inside Adrian seemed to snap. Her lips peeled back in a rictus snarl as she rounded on me. You think you're so clever, don't you? She spat, the venom laid bare at last. With your second-hand soul and... The rushed self-editing was too late. Ethan's eyes went wide with shock, and a dismayed murmur reverberated around the table. Adrian froze as if realizing too late the veil had slipped in spectacular fashion. Her gaze swiveled wildly around the stunned, accusing faces staring back at her. With a garbled cry, she shoved back from the table and fled the room, leaving only a ringing silence in her wake. Finally, at long last, the truth was laid bare. I caught Samantha's eye from across the table, and we shared an exhale of grim triumph. The time for judgment had come, and Adrienne was the one found sorely wanting. The silence that followed Adrienne's exit was deafening. All eyes turned towards me, a kaleidoscope of shock, accusation, and dawning realization etched across the faces of Ethan's family. I drew a fortifying breath, letting the weight of Adrienne's unmasking settle over us all. Ethan was the first to find his voice, his expression twisting with a potent mix of anger and disbelief. Mara, what is going on? What was she talking about? Second-hand soul. The hurt and confusion in his eyes lanced straight through me, but I refused to buckle under the burden of Adrienne's poison. It's about my past, I stated, keeping my voice level. The struggles I went through before finding my way to you. I sent him a pointed look, willing him to understand. Realization flickered across Ethan's features as the unspoken truth, the former addiction I'd confided in him years ago, blazed into the open. His mother paled, grasping the implication immediately. Adrienne? She breathed, horror tempering her voice. Surely she didn't. I fixed her with an unwavering stare. She's been tormenting me for months, ever since she learned about my history. Looks like her mask finally slipped. A tense silence stretched out as the implications sank in. Ethan's father was the first to find his voice, an edge of steel framing his words. Unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. His palm slammed against the table with a resonant thud. We'll get to the bottom of this immediately. No sooner had the declaration left his lips than a tremulous Adrienne reappeared in the doorway, hastily dabbing at her perfectly made-up eyes with a lace handkerchief, the very picture of an aggrieved victim. I don't know what came over me, she stammered unconvincingly. The stress of hosting, it all became too much. Despite her theatrical display, something profound had shifted. Her aura of superiority and entitlement was stripped away, leaving only a shrill, flailing desperation in its wake. Save your hollow apologies, Adrienne, Ethan bit out, his normally affable demeanor replaced by frigid condemnation. We know about your games, your cruelty towards Mara. Her bravado faltered momentarily, then the fight reignited in her eyes with bitter defiance. You can't possibly think I'd stand idly by while you destroyed this family's standing by dragging in. Her lip curled with naked disdain. Her kind. A collective recoil spread around the room, but I held my ground, meeting her venomous stare with stoic resolution. There would be no redemption for the likes of Adrian, not after this. That's enough. Ethan's father's voice cut through the tension like a knife, all traces of warmth extinguished. You're clearly too far gone to be reasoned with right now. Adrian opened her mouth, defiance blazing in her eyes, but her father raised a mollifying hand. Don't say another word you can't take back, Adrian. For now, you'll return to your apartment until you can rejoin society with a reality-based perspective. The ultimatum hung in the air like an executioner's blade. For a moment, it seemed Adrienne might rally one last poisonous counterattack. Then, just as swiftly, the fight drained from her body, leaving only a hollow, bitter husk. With a wordless hiss, she spun on her heel and stormed out, the door slamming mutely behind her. Silence reigned in the wake of her departure. I could practically sense the years of willful blindness being shed, the blinders falling away from those who'd enabled Adrienne's manipulations for far too long. Eventually, it was Ethan's mother who found her voice, weariness etching the lines around her eyes. Mara, we owe you an apology, a profound one. She shook her head slowly. We let this ugliness happen. Let Adrian run amok for reasons I can't begin to fathom. I opened my mouth to respond, but she pressed on with quiet resolution. No more excuses. It's time we, as a family, faced the consequences of enabling a monster in our midst. Around the table, solemn nods met her words. At long last, the bitter truth was embraced. A single teardrop traced down my cheek as Ethan's arms enveloped me in a fierce, sheltering embrace. Justice and reckoning had both been served, in more ways than one. Most importantly, I'd been seen. And there was no going back now. In the days following Adrian's explosive unmasking, a palpable shift gripped the family. The sisterly bond between her and Ethan, once ironclad, had been irreparably shattered. All that remained was a haunting void where unconditional loyalty once resided. I can't believe the depth she stooped to, Ethan murmured, running a hand through his disheveled hair. We were seated in the living room, replaying the events in a numb daze. How could she be so cruel, so evil? I said nothing, simply wrapping my arms around him as he grappled with the harsh reality before us. Ethan's parents entered, their expressions ashen. We've made arrangements for Adrian, his mother began woodenly. She'll be staying with your aunt upstate for the time being. Ethan tensed beside me, and I could sense his instinctive urge to protest, to find some thread of redemption to cling to. But his father's next words severed that futile hope. It's not just us, son. Word is spreading about her behavior. He pinched the bridge of his nose, looking every bit his age. The Ladies' Society has decided to disassociate from her, effective immediately. A chill lanced through me. The prestigious Ladies' Society wielded enormous social capital and influence. Being ousted was a death knell. No, Ethan's anguished whisper said it all. He may have finally seen Adrian's toxic truth, but having it blasted across high society was another devastating reckoning altogether. Over the next few weeks, the shunning rippled outward in a withering conflagration. Friends who'd once flocked to bask in Adrian's archly curated aura now froze her out like a leper. Invitations ceased arriving. Event attendance dried up. Even the slightest interaction was scrutinized by those desperate to distance themselves from the pariah in our midst. The single-minded cruelty that had once been Adrian's calling card was suddenly, viciously reflected back on her tenfold, and she had no one to blame but her own runaway malice. I finally crossed paths with her at the country club one sunny afternoon. She was a diminished shadow seated alone at a remote patio table, shoulders slumped in uncharacteristic defeat. As I approached, her eyes flicked up, and for a fleeting instant I saw the naked hurt and bewilderment laid bare, an ugly truth she could no longer deny. Then just as quickly, the shutters slammed down. Her lips twisted in a snarl of pure unbridled loathing. Is this what you wanted? To take everything from me? To leave me with nothing? The venom in her words struck like a physical blow, but this time I refused to recoil. I didn't take anything, Adrian, I replied, keeping my tone measured. You brought this on yourself with your jealousy and hatred, this. I waved a hand at the empty, shunned tableau surrounding us. This is just karma's shadow finally catching up. For a suspended moment, she seemed to teeter on the precipice of impotent rage and a dawning, horrified self-realization. Then her shoulders slumped, the fight visibly leaching out of her. Just leave me be, she muttered, turning away in hollowed resignation. And with that, I did. Because the battle was long over, I'd emerged the decisive victor simply by embracing the resilience and perseverance Adrian could never comprehend. In the end, her downfall hadn't required any malicious machinations, any shadowy revenge plots. Her increasingly frantic attempts to claw her way back into society's favor only cemented her disgrace further. Like a human supernova burning itself out, Adrian's hatred had simply consumed her from within. I realized then that closure and vindication had been within me all along. All I'd needed was the strength to let karma run its implacable course. In the aftermath of Adrian's spectacular downfall, an unfamiliar sense of peace settled over our family. The constant undercurrent of tension, the minefields we'd all tiptoed through for far too long, had finally been diffused. Ethan in particular seemed to stand taller. The weight of his sister's toxicity finally lifted from his shoulders. Our relationship only grew stronger from the shared trauma we'd endured and overcome. I'm sorry it took me so long to see the truth. He murmured one night as we readied for bed, his arms enveloping me in a tender embrace. You tried to warn me, but I just couldn't accept how far Adrian had fallen. I pulled back and met his gaze steadily. This wasn't your burden to carry alone, Ethan. That's what partnership means, facing the worst of storms together, not just the sunshine. Something shimmered in the depths of his eyes, profound gratitude laced with an abiding love. His kiss spoke volumes as our bodies intertwined in the gathering twilight. In the days and weeks ahead, the renewed bonds with Ethan's parents also blossomed in ways I'd never dared hope for. What had once been a tenuous, artificial connection slowly melted into genuine affection and acceptance. We should have listened to you about Adrian from the start, his father admitted one evening over brandy and cigars. But, well, you know the power of delusion regarding family. I nodded, understanding that all too keenly, but the hurt had faded, replaced by a world of possibility now that the wool had been ripped away. No more deceptions, I stated, meeting his gaze levelly. We start over from a place of honesty this time. His returning nod spoke volumes, and with it a weight seemed to lift from his shoulders. Even in the wider social circles that had once been Adrian's playground, our family's standing slowly rebounded. Where she had sown disgrace and alienation, we now reaped the rewards of solidarity and loyalty hard-won. At a charity gala weeks later, I found myself pulled aside by the Grand Dame of the Ladies' Society, the same woman who had cast the irrevocable shunning of Adrian. Mrs. Wells, she began with the barest hint of contrition tinging her gravelly voice. I fear we may have misjudged you upon your arrival into our circle. Scurrilous rumors can be most misleading. She drew herself up, somehow managing to look down her nose at me despite her diminutive stature. It's clear now that your poise and character were the targets of sabotage from, well, you know the source. Her lips compressed into a grim line. Words may have been said that cannot be unsaid. Associations questioned that cannot be unbroken. I tensed imperceptibly, bracing for the inevitable slight that seemed destined to follow, but the dame's next words knocked me backward on my heels. We would be honored if you would consider accompanying us for next month's retreat at the Hampton estate. My breath caught in my throat as I parsed the audacious overture. The Hampton retreat was the most elite, coveted social event of the season, a privilege solely for those ensconced at the upper echelons. To be invited, especially in the wake of the Adrian fallout, was tantamount to being embraced back into the innermost circle, whole and unquestioned. The message was clear. I'd survived the crucible, emerging untarnished while Adrian burned away to ash and infamy. Struggling to keep my features impassive, I inclined my head with studied grace. The honor would be mine, Dame Elizabeth. I accept most humbly. As she bobbed her own regal acknowledgement, a warm sense of triumph bloomed in my chest. Not a retribution or conquest fueled by pettiness, but a hard-won victory over hatred and prejudice itself. This was the new foundation, wrought from adversity and perseverance. And as I turned to rejoin Ethan at my side, our fingers intertwining with unshakable solidarity, I knew our bond would be eternal. For in conquering our harshest demons from within, we'd forged an invincible bastion against whatever storms still awaited on the horizon.